On behalf of the Cherokee Nation, to Chief Man and our cousins of the Lenape Nation, I greet you with our traditional greeting, Osio. This is a standard greeting we provide, which means welcome to our community, welcome to our day. I have to say that Secretary Redding set the stage very well for this conversation. The notion that agricultural production and the process of producing food for our communities is more social than it is production. It is very much a cultural endeavor. And that's one of the challenges we have. So I'm honored to be here to speak with you. I will remind you that everything is connected, that the economic domain relies upon the social domain, and the social domain relies upon the ecological domain. You typically see this as a three-part Venn diagram with overlapping circles. They are not, they're fully nested. Without an ecological domain, there is no social domain. Without a social domain, there is no economic domain. They are completely hierarchically dependent. I would also remind you that everything is changing, and that rate of change is greater than anything we've ever experienced as a species, as a society, and we don't know how to deal with it. Our recent experiences, I think, bear this out. And most importantly, we are all in this together. This is a normative proclamation that perhaps is different than the previous sort of empirical proclamations of connectivity and change. I would suggest that as a species, this is just as empirical as the previous proclamations. We survive together or we die together. So we're here to talk about three big questions as we talk about the role of agriculture and society in sustainability. What are we trying to sustain? Who gets to decide? And what are more sustainable decisions? And really, Russell, Secretary Redding, laid this out very clearly on what are more sustainable decisions and how we make those decisions. I served with him on Secretary Vilsack's committee for 21st century agriculture, and I can tell you that we struggled with this question significantly. And Secretary Vilsack had strong opinions about community engagement in decision-making that really were insightful. What are we trying to sustain? Well, actually, it's us, because it's all about us, ultimately. This thing we do, agriculture, society, it's a human endeavor. So we're trying to advance and sustain human prosperity. This is not about other, this is about us. The United Nations identified the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. We're struggling to actually meet any of our midpoint achievements in these goals, but these are unambiguous and really uncontroversial goals: ending poverty, ending hunger, good health and well-being. These are not high-minded ideals separate from reality. These are the things we should be about every day. And I saw that Catherine was wearing her SDG pin. I had to go put mine on. You can't see it because of that. When I used to be out and about in the world, 7 months ago, this was on my lapel of my jacket, which I haven't worn in 7 months. And so I encourage you to all seek out and wear the pin, the circle of 17 goals. The challenge we have with these goals is their intention. We can't achieve all of them all at once. They're very complicated. They're very interdependent. And so sometimes we have to make decisions. In ending hunger, do we sacrifice water quality or water availability or life on the land? To provide clean water and sanitation, do we sacrifice climate action by utilizing fossil fuels? These are real decisions. Who gets to decide? Those are the fair questions we are engaged in. And if we do not have a civic infrastructure for deciding, we end up with a breach of trust and that leads to inaction, because here's the other reality we face. This is our reality. It's not a myth. This is not controversial. This is our reality. And our farmers, our producers all around the world know this because they live in it every day. This is not controversial to them, and it's not political to them. And as a scientist, as an engineer, and as a human, I can tell you, we have to be serious about this. My mentor and friend, Dr. Norman Borlaug, when he accepted the Nobel Peace Prize in 1970, said there can be no permanent progress in the battle against hunger until the agencies that fight for increasing food production and those that fight for population control unite in a common effort. He told me many times that if he could have developed a wheat variety that had birth control properties rather than rust resistance, he would have had more impact on humanity. He told me back in 1992 that he had watched the population monster devour his life's work. I think he lived long enough to understand that he was actually incorrect. He was incorrect. But the point is, always the battle against hunger has been with the battle for prosperity. Because as we look at where we were when Norm started his work in the late 40s, early 50s as part of the Marshall Plan, the Green Revolution, we had about 2.5 billion people on the planet. Now we're at about 7.25 billion people. So the question is, what are we going to do next? With current fertility rates, we're going to hit 12 billion. Median estimates put us at 9.5 billion, but we have broad uncertainty, and what happens in the next 10 years will determine where we go next over the next 100 years with the trajectories, because the people who are being born in the next 10 years will have the babies in the next 15 to 20 years, who will have the babies in the next 15 or 20 years. Demographics are destiny. Also, I would suggest to you that when when technology and cultures collide, technology prevails, culture changes. My Cherokee ancestors traded their stone knives for steel knives the moment they could, and they more importantly traded their clay pots for steel pots very quickly, and for copper pots. We're all in this together, and the folks who are coming to dinner in the next 30 years aren't going to be from around here. This is another one of our great challenges. So how do we connect to the people who are going to be desiring food, and food of a higher quality? And they're going to be from, our cousins are going to grow in populations in Africa, and Central and South America, Asia outside of India and China, Southeast Asia. Those are the areas that are going to grow fastest. One of the challenges is we already utilize 40% of Earth's surface for food production. Now, I know I'm preaching to the choir, but choir, we need training. We need to tune up a little bit. We're out of tune. We don't sing in harmony adequately enough to make communications of these challenges clear to the general public. We have to be better at this. So if we're already using 43% of Earth's surface for agricultural production, it's the largest single biome on the planet, where are we going to produce another 50 to 100% more calories from the land in order to feed the additional 3 billion people coming to dinner? If we're not careful, we will eat the planet. And that's where we have common alliance with World Wildlife Fund, Conservation, the Nature Conservancy, Environmental Defense Fund, other conservation organizations. So in order to know where we're going, we need to know where we came from and how we got here. We've only been at this mechanized agriculture gig for about 100 years. And it's relatively new to us. And so we've done some things really badly. We've also done some things we've learned a lot of strong lessons. I'll remind you, in 1950, an estimated 30% of humanity was chronically malnourished. Half of us were starving or food insecure. We didn't know where our breakfasts would come from. 30% were starving, literally dying of food insecurity. Today, only 11% of humanity is hungry. That's still way too many. But as Paul Collier in his book, The Bottom Billion, makes clear, they're hungry not, and Norm told me this too when I was finishing my bachelor's degree in agronomy. He said, hunger is no longer an agronomic problem, it's an economic problem. He said, if you want to solve this problem, become an economist. Sorry, I couldn't do it. So I went on to explore plant sciences, engineering, water quality, and other areas of life, and how humans live on the land. And he said that was okay. In 1950, global child mortality, that's death before 5 years of life, was greater than 22%. 1 in 5 children died before age of 5 on the planet. Today, it's less than 4%. That's way too many children dying. And many of them are dying due to preventable waterborne disease, which can be solved with a 55-gallon drum of sand and a gallon of bleach. It's not a high-tech challenge. It's an economic challenge. I'm the grandson of Dust Bowl survivors in Oklahoma. My Cherokee ancestors and my Mennonite ancestors both survived this ecological agricultural calamity brought on by bad agricultural practices and convergent with a drought of record. The Dust Bowl changed the way we lived on the land and changed the way we experienced the land. It changed the way we experienced each other. Many of my grandparents' siblings moved to California, where they were called dirty Okies. They were immigrants. They were put in camps. They were contained, and they were not allowed to basic civil rights. They were exploited for labor. Sound familiar? It's a very personal issue. We've learned from our mistakes. We have learned a lot from our mistakes. The NRI National Resources Inventory was just released from NRCS last week. What we've learned is that soil erosion on croplands decreased 35% between 1982 and 2017. 35%. Now, we're still losing about 6.7 or 2.6 tons per acre per year to water erosion and another 3.2 tons per acre to wind erosion. Way too much. I'm sorry, it's 1.96 now to wind erosion. Way too much, but we have made significant progress, and we know where and why the erosion is occurring. So we've gotten better. Prosperity from the land created opportunities for people to improve their lives and the lives of their children, and it does today, and that is the promise of tomorrow. Prosperity from the land is the way we raise that bottom billion up while we're also feeding that additional 3 billion people. And part of the reason we can do this is because we are a literate species for the first time in our history. In 1950, more than 44% of us were illiterate. Today, 86% of us can read and write. 86%. So Norm's challenge about hunger was, and the relationship with population. Remember, he received the Nobel Peace Prize in 1970. That was when our annual rate of global population rate peaked. And we've been going down ever since because prosperous people have fewer babies. The best birth control on the planet is a woman's prosperity. If you want to save the planet, educate women. And I've been challenged, well, you need to empower women. And my response is educated women don't need me to empower them. Educated women empower themselves. Education of women is the key. So how did we get here? It was simple, sweat and science. We have worked collectively. The program of the Farm of the Future is about sweat and science. It's about working hard, learning hard lessons, and implementing those lessons. And if it doesn't work, do something else. Iterative improvement. So where are we going? 10 billion people are coming to dinner in 40 years. We got 7.5 of them at the table today. Increase production by 50 to 100% in the next 4 decades in order to feed them. We've got to freeze the footprint of agriculture so that we don't eat the planet. Other life matters to us. Carbon budgets will constrain our choices, that is fossil fuels and other carbons, and drive us to innovate technologies. But water scarcity will limit productivity, and that's why climate change is so important. If climate change is a shark, its teeth are water. Now, we've worked with multi-stakeholder groups like Field to Market, the Alliance for Sustainable Agriculture, to focus on defining, measuring, and advancing sustainability for food, fiber, and fuel production. This is a multi-stakeholder organization that we started 15 years ago that includes the entire supply chain, from ag producers to conservation organizations, all the way through to supply chain endpoint providers, including Walmart, including McDonald's, and others. We define sustainable agriculture as meeting the needs of the present while improving the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. My grandfather, the Mennonite farmer, would say, leave the wood stack a little taller. Increasing productivity to meet future food and fiber demands, improving the environment, improving the human health, improving the social and economic well-being of agricultural communities. Secretary Redding laid this out very clear. This is our charge from an aspirational perspective. Our key performance indicators have to be outcomes-based, science-driven, technology-neutral, and transparent. And as a multi-stakeholder organization, we have defined these for environmental key performance indicators. We still have social and economic that we're working on developing. Those are very complicated and very hard because it's a complex world. But environmental are actually easier. Greenhouse gas emissions, soil loss, energy use, water use, land use. These are the starting points. And if we can't get these right, we're not going to do well with the others. Then we're now moving to water quality, nutrient use efficiency, habitat, and biodiversity. These have been adopted across the entire agricultural production spectrum in the United States, from row crops to specialty crops, animal agriculture, animal protein production. We benchmark our performance and see how far we've come. So we have the 2016 report. We've got another report we're working on now. It's a national report on status across those indicators with field to market. And we present the data in a way that's understandable so that people can see how we've improved and how in some cases we've slipped behind. We had a drought of record in 2011 that meant our irrigation water use actually increased, which means our water use efficiency decreased for that period because we had to substitute green water, rainfall, with blue water, pumped water, which means we used more energy and we emitted more greenhouse gases. Everything's connected. Climate change will drive us to make those decisions. Now, it's a big continent, this continent we live on. It has been occupied by humans for the anthropological evidence is shifting now as we learn more for at least 20,000 and maybe as long as 40,000 years. Humans have been on this continent. And my ancestors, the Cherokee, managed the eastern woodlands intensively and explicitly for their well-being. We produce corn, soybeans, and other grains in the Corn Belt. It's about 34 million hectares. It's a huge area. If we just look at the Corn Belt, think about how diverse that is from a latitude difference, from Louisiana all the way to Minnesota. Incredibly diverse. So no single solution solves all problems. We have to have a diversity of solutions, and we have to let the farmers choose those solutions. Because here's our big challenge. We have a question we're working on with the National Academies of Sciences, USDA, and a group of other NGOs. Can we make agriculture a carbon negative enterprise? Can we sequester more carbon in the soil from agriculture than we produce from our food? We think we can. If we look at what we've done in the last 30 years, we've increased organic carbon using technologies, not just genetically modified crops, but conservation tillage, improved tillage practices, improved cropping systems with row widths, disease prevention. Other technologies have allowed us to actually sequester carbon in the soil. We're seeing increased carbon sequestration in some counties. We have some corn and soybean production systems that are net carbon negative, some. We think we can expand that, learn from that, and with new technologies emerging, including the very exciting real possibility of nitrogen fixing corn within the next 10 years out of Berkeley, just down the road from you, Dr. Brinkley. This is going to be very exciting to see. Think about reducing exogenous nitrogen for corn by 50%. What that will do for greenhouse gas emissions, water quality, soil health. It will be dramatic, but it's complicated. Technology and data give us better decisions. And what we're about is giving farmers the tools to make better decisions. Better decisions about common goals that we outline, common goals of nutritious, profitable, and sustainable food. These are not controversial, they're just hard. Finally, how do we get young people into agriculture? Because the barriers to entry economically into row crop agriculture are just prohibitive for most people. Small scale, high density, high value, direct to market production of specialty crops is the key. This is the key. And, we're working on this in Hawaii, we're working on this in South Dakota, and we're working on this in Southeast Arkansas. How do we bring this sort of small scale, high value production to market? A small farmer can have 5 acres of land with high tunnels and greenhouses and can produce enough to have a life of profitable dignity with some risk management. We worked with the Farm Bill so that specialty crops can be part of risk management insurance. We're trying to, and now we have to work on Food Safety Modernization Act compliance and good agricultural practice certification with our small producers to make this more accessible. These are our challenges, but this is the way young people can move to peri-urban agriculture. It's no longer a fringe enterprise. I can tell you that marijuana is the gateway drug to horticulture. We are going to see an incredible explosion of young people who, once the marijuana boom busts, and I give it 5 years, then we're going to see an incredible explosion of horticultural interest amongst 30-somethings who have the experience and the passion to produce from the land. These are maybe outrageous goals, and maybe they're very hard to understand or to think, but I always return to Wendell Berry when I'm frustrated or when I'm a little overcome by the challenges of the day. It may be that when we no longer know what to do, we've come to a real work. And when we no longer which way to go, we have begun our real journey. The mind that is not baffled is not employed. The impeded stream is the one that sings. Thank you very much for your attention. I look forward to our conversation.